episode 261 of the CRICKETher Weekly. I feel like it's going to be quite a big episode this week, Syd, because it appears that the ECB's post-Ashes review has come to a conclusion, and there have been not just one, but two big scalps. Jon Lewis went on Friday, and then 10 AM on a Saturday, the ECB released the news that Heather Knight has gone as captain. Now, of course, the legacy of Jon Lewis will live on in the form of these t-shirts, still available at League Tees. Just wanted to get that out there. But he will no longer be the England coach. And after almost 9 years, Heather Knight will no longer be the England captain when they go head to head against West Indies in 8 weeks' time. I just wanted to start by clarifying, because there does seem to be a little bit of confusion about this. Have they quit or were they fired, Syd?
Well, I think that Sir Alan behind us has said all that needs to be said. No, I mean, the way that the press releases have been worded makes it pretty clear that they were both fired.
Yeah.
I am kind of surprised in Heather Knight's case. I mean, I'm so surprised that she wasn't given the opportunity to resign that my guess is that she was given the opportunity to resign and refused. The reason for her not to do that, maybe to do with the contracts, I'm purely speculating here, but it may be that if she resigns, she loses a load of money. Whereas if she forces them to fire her, she gets to keep that. That's certainly going to be the case with Jon Lewis. So if he'd resigned, he would have, lost another year of pay. Whereas they're going to have to buy him out the rest of his contract. I think it's another year, isn't it?
Yes, another bit of a year. Yeah. It's an interesting one because, as you say, in both cases, the ECB kind of say, we've decided to appoint a new captain, but they've also got a quote from Jon Lewis about, unfortunately, I won't be able to finish this job. And he was pretty unequivocal during and even at the end of the Ashes by kind of saying, I'm not going anywhere. They have both been fired. I think there's not really any doubt about that. How are you feeling about it, Syd? Well, how are we feeling?
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like I was the first person to kind of break cover on this last summer when I said, it's time for Heather Knight to start moving on, and I suggested that she needed to step down from the captaincy, that there were clearly issues, even though England were last summer winning games, all over the place. You could see that there were issues.
You could. And
those issues really came home to roost in the Ashes. So, I think these are the right decisions.
Yeah.
What do you think, Raf? I mean, you wrote a piece in The Guardian right after the Ashes saying that Jon Lewis and Heather Knight should both be fired. They have both been fired. Did the ECB do the right thing?
Yeah, definitely they did. Yeah, and like you, I'm a little bit surprised, but also there's an element of relief because I think this was definitely the right thing. We were getting towards a point where we've now got about 8 weeks until that series against West Indies. You're getting to a point where it's do or die, and you're starting to think, are they actually going to make any changes at all? But yeah, I mean, you've been vindicated. It was nearly a year ago actually that you started that discussion. We were at Chelmsford and it was May 2024. We both said during, and I wrote at the end of the Ashes, that they needed to get rid of both coach and captain. And I think we were, it felt a bit like we were lone voices in saying that Heather Knight needed to go actually. So I do feel a degree of vindication, and I certainly think that this is the right thing for the team. I think that getting rid of Heather, as I wrote for The Guardian yesterday, is the ECB acknowledging that there are wider issues, there are cultural issues. It's not just a case of we make a small change at the top and we get in a new coach, which is what they've done for the last couple of Ashes. It's no, we really think that we need to sweep out the old and bring in the new. And that to me suggests that the review has found some not very nice findings, but not surprising findings.
Yeah, and they're obviously not going to talk exactly about what those are,
No.
But yeah.
You read between the lines. Yeah. You have to read between the lines with these things. I also feel a little bit odd, personally, just because it's such a big change for England. And for me, my entire professional career as a journalist has been with Heather Knight as the England captain. So it does just feel a little bit like the sand's been kind of removed from under my feet, and I'm a little bit going, oh my goodness, what on earth is going to happen? Because that's the big question now, isn't it?
Yeah, this must be how the Australian journalists felt when Meg Lanning stepped down. It's like, what happens now? How does this even work without Meg Lanning?
And the total lack of succession planning would really have been the only thing that could have saved Heather Knight, I think.
Yeah, and even I had acknowledged that perhaps the best thing to do was for her to continue as T20 captain, but step aside from the ODI and Test captaincy to allow a certain other person to take up whoever that might be to take up the role. So yeah, they've gone the whole hog. They've swept out. They're starting to clean the Aegean stables that are the England women's squad at the moment. Big change coming.
Yeah, well,
Possibly.
I mean, let's talk about the consequences of that lack of succession planning, because finally, we've been talking about this and warning about this for about 2 or 3 years, and it's just breathtaking that nobody around the England team at a senior level has done anything about this. That now we are left in a situation where, as you put it on social media, there are only least bad options. There are no good options. There are no easy answers to who might be the next captain. So maybe let's just talk about all of the possible candidates, Sid. If we start with the kind of less plausible and move towards the slightly more plausible but still not great options, I guess Danny Wyatt-Hodge. So we're talking about people whose spot in the team is basically guaranteed. So Danny Wyatt-Hodge.
Yeah, I mean, she's never shown any interest in captaincy. She's not shown much interest in leadership. It's just not her bag. Her bag's more Gucci, I think. So,
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amy Jones, who's obviously in all 3 formats, is still the wicketkeeper. Well, actually did the job before. In the summer of 2022, wasn't it? After the Commonwealth Games, when Nat Silver-Brunt was taking a mental health break, and actually hated it. Really didn't enjoy it. Doesn't want to do it.
Yeah,
you can't have somebody as England captain who doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, what she was saying at the time amounted to, paraphrasing, I wouldn't do that again if you paid me £1 million a game.
So there you go. So that's her. Sophie Eccleston.
No, that's just out of the question. She's there's no doubt that she's the best bowler in the world, but she's very hot-headed, and she's not the right person. And especially as we stand, you can't reward her for what's happened in Australia. You can't. Yeah,
she's sort of become a little bit representative of some of the sort of cultural and discipline issues around the team, unfortunately for her. So yeah, I agree. That's a big no. Kate Cross, obviously not currently in the T20 team, but on paper is a candidate based on the fact that she's the most recent person to captain England who isn't Heather Knight, because of course she was captain on that tour to Ireland in September. For my part, that actually rules her out rather than rules her in, because the reason that she was named as captain on that Ireland tour, and she knows this, is because they were still sidestepping the issue of naming a genuine successor to Heather.
Yeah, didn't actually Nat captain one game in South Africa, I think.
Okay, all right, but
it's
on an entire tour.
Yeah. Kate's obviously captained England 6 times on that tour.
And did a very good job.
And she's definitely culturally different. She's not part of that clique. But she will be a very short-term option. She's starting to suffer the injuries that all fast bowlers start to suffer. As they move towards their mid-30s rather than their early 30s. The biggest thing with Kate Cross, if you're going to bring in someone that's not part of the T20 picture at the moment, there's a better candidate who we'll get to in a minute.
Okay. Do you want to leave that till the end then? Okay. So the maybe slightly more plausible candidates that a few people have mentioned, Charlie Dean. She's young. She has captained in the 100.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Okay, I mean, I'm repeating myself very much here. She did captain in the 100 for one season in 2022, and what happened after that? She didn't captain again. Have you thought about why that might be? But the biggest thing for Charlie Dean, the biggest thing acting against her is her batting's not good enough to be in the team as a batter. And if you select her, you tie your hands behind your back in terms of your bowling selections, because it forces you to go, we're definitely going to select, you're obviously going to select Sophie Eccleston, and it forces you to select Charlie Dean as, a right arm off spinner, and that constrains all your other selections around that. And I just don't think that you can constrain the selection in that way, unfortunately, for Charlie Dean. It's come at the wrong time. In a couple of years' time, maybe her batting's come on to a level where, you can go, she's selected for her batting. And then that opens up for her. But I suspect in a couple of years' time, somebody else is going to be have overtaken her in that regard.
Okay, interesting. And then, of course, the current vice-captain, Nat Sciver-Brunt. Now, vice-captain traditionally was the person who would step in when the captain retired or stepped down. They were seen as the kind of natural next person off the blocks, I suppose. We have not been convinced about Nat Sciver-Brunt for quite a long time, and this dates back to the Commonwealth Games. Just a quick reminder about what happened. England basically decided that they couldn't be bothered to put in a proper performance in the bronze medal match against New Zealand, having just lost the previous day to India, and squandered their chance of winning gold. So they just decided that bronze medal wasn't worth showing up
They
for.
just threw a petulant hissy fit, and that's on the captain, I'm afraid.
Yeah, because it shows a lack of team discipline and a lack of unity, and that, that's around about the same time with where you had Eccleston smashing a chair with her bat, and other people swearing on the field, and basically things broke down. And really, that's the point at which the ECB needed to go, hang on a minute, Nat Sciver-Brunt is not the next England captain.
And what happened after that as well? What happened after that is that Nat Sciver had stepped back from, she was the captain of the Rockets, and she had stepped back from the captaincy of that because she couldn't hack it. She then was like, I can't do the captaincy of England, which is why Amy Jones ended up doing it for a handful of matches. I mean,
because
to be fair,
it was very difficult, and it is a very difficult job.
It's a really tough job.
Yeah. So there's no shame in Nat Sciver going, actually, I really need a break from this. I need a little bit of a break from cricket. That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is that then at that point you go, we need to think about somebody who can do that job, because doing it on a permanent full-time basis is going to be a lot harder than doing it for a few weeks.
Absolutely. So they may well end up appointing her, but I don't think she's the right person. Also, if you're going to try, if your aim here is to sweep out the current clique that are running things, and where there's squad issues, shall we say, you pick someone that's currly
in the leadership team. Yeah,
Sorry,
we might
leadership
refer to it as the leadership group, perhaps. I don't think she's the right person. I think we need her to be all guns blazing with the bats as well. Sid, earlier you referred to somebody who wasn't in the current T20 team as your preference for where England might turn next. So do you want to talk about her?
Yeah, Tammy Beaumont, I think. What I said about Kate Cross is if you're gonna go for Kate Cross, someone that's not part of the T20 setup for reasonably good reasons, then it actually is a better option, which is Tammy Beaumont. Tammy Beaumont has been frozen out of England's T20 setup, but she can play short form cricket. Let's not forget, she is the only woman to have scored 100 in the 100. She's a serious short form player. Yes, she's been frozen out by England in favour of younger options, but she could easily step back in. Tammy Beaumont wants the job. She's a serious candidate. She's not part of the current clique, she is, I think, capable of doing it for a couple of years. Yeah, I mean, of course, she's the wrong side of 30 as well. But don't worry, Tammy, you're still the right side of 40 and the right side of 50. Ideally they'd appoint someone a bit younger, but if you're going to appoint someone for a couple of years, I think Tammy's the right choice there, as someone that's kind of outside the current clique.
Okay. I suppose that there might also be alternatives from outside of the current squads.
Where can you possibly be going with
that
this?
actually wasn't where I was going initially.
Okay.
There are a few names that have been thrown around on social media
That's
and below the
true,
line
there
on the BBC, for example. Holly Armitage, Georgia Adams, Bryony Smith, all successful domestic captains, all who have been kind of in and around England a little bit. Albeit Georgia Adams more on the tour of Ireland when some of the main squad weren't available. So you could throw in a total outsider into the team. Although what's interesting actually about Tammy, can I just say, is it feels like she is the external candidate despite being currently in the ODI
an automatic
and test
selection
teams.
for the ODI
But
and test
because
teams.
of the way in which she, as you say, is not kind of part of that current group, it does feel like she is she's a better choice than bringing in somebody totally new to the setup. However, having said that, Sid, there is somebody whose name's been on the tip of your tongue for this entire episode who we haven't talked about yet. Do you want to talk about her?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to bring in somebody from the outside, somebody that hasn't played many games for England, why not bring in the person who is clearly the best captain, the finest natural leader in the English game, and that includes anybody in the men's game as well. Sorry, Ben Stokes, she's better than you as a leader. Grace Scrivens.
Wow, that's huge. Okay.
Until you've seen her up close, I think people just genuinely don't realise quite how extraordinary she is as a leader and a captain. Setting aside, her cricketing form, and it's really, really unusual. I would never normally suggest that we play somebody that I admit is not worth her place in the team quite on merit. She's very close with the ODI and test teams. She's definitely not there in the T20 teams, but she is such an extraordinary leader, such an extraordinary captain, and we have already seen that in the way that she dragged Sunrisers from zeros to heroes.
Yeah.
That's the most public manifestation of that I think that you could still do that. But I accept that everyone else thinks I'm bonkers, and it's not going to happen, and maybe it never will happen for Grace Scrivens. If you kind of slight aside here, Raf.
Okay.
If you'd gone back in time 15 years and you said to almost anybody working in the women's game 15 years ago, oh, the England captain has just retired. She was captain for nearly 10 years. She captained England nearly 200 times.
And won a World Cup.
Everyone would go, blimey, Sophie Luff had a really good career there, didn't she? Because absolutely everybody 15 years ago was convinced that Sophie Luff would be England captain for 10 years. And the number of games that Sophie Luff played for England, ultimately, none.
So far.
So.
Yeah, so I guess, what's your ideal scenario then, Sid? I suggested in The Guardian the possibility of having an interim, perhaps, where you have somebody do it for a couple of years while you bring Grace into the setup and customise her to actually international cricket and what it feels like. So do you think Tammy for interim 2 years?
Yeah, this is where I'd be going now. I think that you make Tammy the captain. You very clearly make Grace vice captain for ODIs and tests, although there isn't another test for a year or so, I don't think.
No, the next one is against India at Lords in 2026.
So you explicitly go, Grace Scrivens is now the heir apparent. She's the vice captain for ODIs and tests. You make somebody else vice captain. Perhaps that's where you make Charlie Dean vice captain into the T20s. And you say, Tammy's going to be captain for the next 2 years. Everybody knows that Tammy's not going to be captain in 10 years' time because it's pretty unlikely she's still going to be playing at 42. That would make her 43.
Something like that.
So that's not going to happen. So and you then start having those those leadership, those succession, that putting that work in to make sure that there is a smooth transition from Tammy to Grace.
Yeah, because ultimately we're in this situation because of leadership failings. I'm not talking about the players. I'm talking about the people who are in charge of the players. We're in this situation because they've just absconded from their responsibilities, and we need to make sure that this does not happen again. That what we're doing now is we've got to name a captain for now. We've then got to think about who's going to be doing it in 2 years, who's going to be doing it in 5 years, who might be doing it in 10 years, and so that we don't end up in this situation again. Please listen to us. Because we've tried to tell you for 2 or 3 years, and here we are, up something creek without a paddle. Okay, so that's that's a good kind of rundown of your potential scenario. I mean, I'm prepared to accept that that's the best that we're going to get at this point. I think Tammy could make a decent fist of it. I agree. One thing that we haven't talked about is that Heather Knight is stepping down from the captaincy, but she's actually staying in the ranks as a batter. Now, again, I'm feeling a little bit vindicated here because recently I've said that I thought that she might quite possibly do this. You said you didn't think that she would do this.
I still don't think that she will in practice.
Okay.
I think that, again, that there may well be a good contractual reason why she has done this, because, that keeps her England contract, and which is obviously worth substantially more money than if she had to go back to Somerset and go, hey guys, can I have a contract here, please, even though you've already spent all your money for next season, which would be very awkward for everybody. So, yeah, I mean, if I was the incoming captain, one of my preconditions, albeit I don't want Heather Knight leaning over my shoulder, the only circumstance where I can see it is that if they make Nat captain for a couple of years and then Heather is able to stay. But then at that point, you are absolutely definitely not clearing out the creek. No. And all your cultural issues will potentially remain ready to blow up again at any moment.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's an approach that you can take. So I wouldn't be surprised if we rarely see, if ever see Heather again.
Well, that's an interesting one. I feel that that the big argument against that is that potentially, having watched the Ashes, they do need her batting.
On the other hand, how many matches in the Ashes did she actually win for England?
Oh, hang on. Let me think about that for a second. None. Okay, but we're yet again in the situation where England are then kind of maybe cutting off their nose to spite their face.
I'm not sure they are cutting it off their nose. They're going to lose the matches anyway. I mean, I just don't think it's a really long shadow.
Yeah.
And people will point to the example of Joe Root, who has successfully transitioned, back into being a normal squad member under Ben Stokes. But Joe Root is a very, very different character to Heather Knight. Heather Knight will cast a serious shadow over it.
Well, she has done the job for nearly a decade.
Yeah.
And that is going to make it really difficult for her successor if she is there in the dressing room, ready to pick holes in anything that you get wrong. And things will be got wrong, because that's what happens in cricket.
Yeah.
That's what happens with captaincy. You have to experiment. So I think that is really tricky. I wonder how Heather Knight would have felt if Charlotte Edwards had been kept on and had been sort of looking over her shoulder in that way. She never had to experience that.
Well, I think that's because Robbo knew that couldn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. So he made a tough call. So maybe somebody somewhere's got to make a tough call. Unfortunately, they don't seem to have a great track record for making
who is that person that's going to be making that tough call, Raf? Because we haven't talked at all about Jon Lewis.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we've kind of done this. Like, it's pretty obvious who we think is going to be the next coach. Charlotte Edwards has already effectively said that she's going to apply for it, and there's nobody out there who's better qualified. That's just.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, are there going to be any other serious candidates? Because if you're a semi-serious candidate, is someone like the other Jon Lewis, is he going to bother applying?
Yeah, you go through the process.
Oh yeah, no, but if you're the other Jon Lewis, for example,
I get it. I understand what you're saying, but it's the experience of going through the process. That's like saying I should never apply for promotion if I don't think I'm going to get it.
It's a lot of effort to go to though for a job.
No, he can just dust off his application from 2 and a bit years ago.
That's true.
No, I'm actually serious, and I think it's important that people don't think, oh, Lottie's a shoo-in, so we won't bother applying.
Give mediocre white men a chance.
That's really harsh, Sid. Wow. You said it. If I said that, I'd be really in trouble. Okay, anyway, so there's no point in talking at length about that. I'm sorry. Where does this leave us in terms of the overall review, just briefly? In terms of, we've had questions coming in about what's it look like, who's been involved. As far as we're aware, there hasn't been any external involvement, but we don't know. I have asked the ECB this, and all they said was basically it's not appropriate for them to reveal details about who's been involved at this point. I don't know whether we'll ever find out. They have certainly released these 2 big bits of news about Lewis and Knight, just with press releases, with no opportunity for the media to actually ask questions. So that's where we are. We'll see where we are in a week or so's time. Has the review concluded? We think it has, but we don't know. There could be potentially more big news coming, maybe more retirements.
It's coming up to 10 o'clock, Raf. Who are they going to sack today?
Well, let's see. I do totally agree with people who are questioning the fact, though, that Claire Connor and Jonathan Finch have conducted a review of cultural difficulties surrounding the England women's team themselves when they are potentially part of the problem. Now, that doesn't mean they are part of the problem, but it does mean that they needed somebody else to come in and assess that question independently.
Yeah, and ultimately, they're the people that appointed, these leaders. They're the people that allowed the situation to develop with the lack of succession planning. At any point, Claire Connor and or Jonathan Finch could have stepped in and gone, guys, you need to do some proper succession planning and get on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they never did.
They didn't.
They made noises about doing it. Even Jonathan Lewis himself made noises at the end of last summer about, oh yeah, of course, that's something that we're always thinking about. Did anything happen? No.
No.
So I mean, it's this is the way life is, isn't it? The people at the top, they tend to be able to kind of slide away from responsibility in a lot of these cases.
Yeah.
But perhaps they shouldn't be.
Well, don't promise us, Claire Connor. Don't promise us that you're going to get some independence in and then not do so. Because that's trying to have your cake and eat it, to tell the media that you might do that and then not do it. Now, we don't know if they've done it, okay? I'm reading between the lines here, but what I think is if there had been, they would have
told us, yes.
Yeah, because that would have given the whole thing more credence.
Yeah.
And they haven't told us that, so there we go. Anyway, we've got about 8 weeks until England v West Indies. As I said in The Guardian, time's ticking, guys. You've got quite a lot to achieve between now and then.
The real question is, Raf, will they appoint a captain or will they just go with an interim captain?
Okay, that's a segue into, well, we just briefly wanted to talk about the New Zealand captaincy, didn't we? And I suppose this is maybe potentially an example that even when you have some plans, the best laid plans for captaincy succession don't work out as you expected. Over to you, Sid.
Yeah, so New Zealand are currently engaged in their final series against Australia. They have been absolutely...
When you say their final series against Australia, you
final
mean
series
of
the summer.
this
yes,
summer?
They've been absolutely hammered. It's 2-0, but New Zealand are down on the carpet with blood pouring out of...
Despite being reigning world champions.
Yeah, Australia have just absolutely stamped their authority all over them. 2 huge defeats. Anyway, the most important thing here is the captaincy. So New Zealand waited until Amelia Kerr got back from the IPL to announce the squad and to announce the captain against Australia, and the captain against Australia, the continuing interim captain, was Susie Bates.
Yeah.
Now, this is pure speculation. This is not coming from any conversations I've had. So, with that caveat, it feels to me like what's happened is that Amelia Kerr got home from the WPL and they said to her, we want to make you captain, and she said no. It's the only possible explanation. There's no reason why, if she was going to be the captain, why they would not have named her. They waited to announce the squad until after she got back, presumably to talk to her, and she said no. And now the New Zealand selectors are going, oh my God, what do we do now? Because there is nobody in that team that's the right side of 30 that is certain of their place at the team.
It's a very interesting
and
dynamic,
everybody assumed it was going to be Amelia Kerr.
Well, but it might still be.
And it might
she
still
might
be.
have said no, not now.
No.
She might have said I'm tired.
That's just
okay.
That's
but also we should say fair enough.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to do it, then you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a big job. It has a lot of off-field responsibilities as well, which Heather Knight started off by really disliking. And you are all consumed by it in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Good on her. She stand up and goes, no, I don't want to do this.
It just leaves the New Zealand selectors in a little bit of a pickle
now, because they now have, they have a little bit of an off season, but there'll be black playing games soon enough, and they need to find a solution to a problem in some ways worse than England's, because they haven't even got anybody that's really worth their place in the team across both formats. Not that's an automatic selection.
Okay, well, let's see what happens.
Maybe they'll end up going for a very short-term option again. You could appoint Maddie Green for 2 years, but Maddie Green's 33.
I still think Amelia Kerr might end up doing it. I think there might be specific circumstances at play here that we're not aware of. But let's.
Yeah,
I think it's a wait and see type situation. Anyway, we should wrap up in a minute. Just wanted to say finally, thank you so much for all of your comments and responses to our question about how much you pay for watching cricket. We had comments from viewers in Australia, New Zealand, India, Canada, the USA. I think that's most of them. Sorry if I've missed any. And some quite varying pricing structures, but it does seem that in the main, we are paying through the nose in England to be able to watch cricket when we're not interested in watching any other sports, basically.
Yeah, it's basically Australia is the only other place where people are paying a similar amount to us, but everywhere else, people are paying a lot less. I mean, that's kind of understandable in India in very direct terms, because obviously, you know, the Indian economy works in a very different way from the English one. But yeah.
All right, so thanks for that. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you in a week's time. Maybe there'll be more news from the review. Maybe we've had the big news. Let's see. Bye for now.
Bye.